There are no two language learning journeys that are exactly the same. I believe that you can learn a lot and maybe get a little bit of extra motivation by simply listening to other people's stories. And here is mine. Hey, my fellow English learner! You're watching Fluent English with Lady Giraffe. I'm Olga, and today I'm sharing my English learning journey from A0 to C1, spanning more than 20 years. And at the end, I'm gonna share a secret behind me talking so well with you right now on camera. I started from nothing, like everybody else. And like many of you, I had lessons at school a couple of times a week for quite a few years. 10 actually. And when you hear somebody saying, I've been studying English for 10 years, you may be tempted to reply, wow, that's a lot. You must be really good at speaking now. This is a common misconception. In reality, the way you're studying something is way more important than how long you've been studying it. At school, we focused on learning new vocabulary, doing a lot of grammar exercises, and reading and translating texts from English into my native tongue. Our speaking practice mostly consisted of reciting small texts that we learned by rote and answering a couple of tiny questions every once in a while. My writing skills were as poor as my speaking skills, and we didn't have any listening materials back then, so my listening skills were virtually non-existent. When I graduated from high school, I was around pre-intermediate. In other words, my level was around A2, I think. That doesn't sound great after 10 years of studies, huh? Keep in mind that I grew up in the middle of Siberia, Russia, in a village, and it was the 90s and early 2000s. So my access to materials in English wasn't great. And everything I watched on TV was dubbed in Russian. I recently had a talk with another Russian person, and he was shocked to hear that I graduated from school with only A2 in English. He said that he and all his classmates graduated with at least a C1 level. Turned out that his teacher was a native English speaker, and his class even traveled to English-speaking countries a few times. Also, this person was 10 years younger than me. So he obviously grew up with the internet. What I'm trying to say is that your access to materials matters when it comes to learning a language. And right now, with the internet, you have access to so many fantastic resources and materials. Do I regret studying English so slowly at school over the years? Not really. At least not now. I used to think that my school years were a waste, and the methods of studying we used there were old-fashioned and boring. I've changed my mind since then. Now I think that exercise books are cool, that grammar exercises are important, and that translation is a really useful method and a really useful tool for learning a language. Learning a language is a slow process, and you need some time to consolidate the information you get. And the basic knowledge of vocabulary and grammar I got through sheer memorization and countless grammar exercises helped me a lot later when I wanted to study English by myself. I also studied English for 2 years at university, but that doesn't count. I learned nothing new except for the difference between an attorney and a barrister. I studied law at university. The next 2 years were a big pile of nothing. That's, my friend, how I spent the first 14 years of my English learning journey. I wanted to improve my English at that point, but had no idea where to start. And then something magical happened. And you know this kind of magic very well. It's called the internet. ESL was the first podcast I stumbled upon, and I was instantly hooked by their interesting topics, very slow and understandable English, and a good sense of humor. Now you need to subscribe to this podcast to listen to it, but back then it was free to listen to, and I did that a lot. A few hours a day for a few years, a couple of years, I think, at least. And I learned a ton about the English language and about the American culture. After that, I slowly started reading in English. Children's and young adult books first, and then a lot of adult fantasy series. I think I've read more than 400 books in English by now. And besides reading, I also listened to audiobooks and watched a lot of TV shows and YouTube. I consumed a lot of content in English in the next 6 years or so. And this was the reason I jumped from A2, pre-intermediate, to B2, upper intermediate, without actually studying anything. At least I had this level when it came to my passive skills, listening and reading. And my active skills were, well, that's a whole other story. In 2017, I decided to take IELTS, one of Cambridge English exams. And I got assessed by a teacher, and to my horror, I realized that my speaking and writing skills were pretty subpar. I thought to myself, how could my speaking and writing be that bad? I spent literally years reading and listening in English. That was silly of me, but I seriously believed that consuming content was enough, that I didn't actually need to speak and write in English. So here I was, my vocabulary was pretty good because of years of reading in English, but I couldn't write a normal paragraph of an essay in English, or I couldn't express my ideas out loud very well. I needed to do something. That's why I decided to find a teacher and start having speaking lessons. I found a Russian teacher and I had my speaking lessons in a small group without a camera. So we only listened to each other through headphones. And we had lessons, I think, 3 times a week for a while. It was a slow process, not gonna lie. There wasn't any rapid progress for me. Only after finishing the lessons, after I think a year and a half, I suddenly noticed that speaking wasn't as challenging for me and it didn't feel like a chore anymore. During this time, I also became interested in pronunciation, especially in the so-called general American accent. One teacher on YouTube, Hadar Shemesh, caught my attention and I enrolled in her pronunciation course. I still recommend her channel to anyone trying to improve their pronunciation and intonation. And the best thing I learned from her course was that with enough practice and patience, I could improve my pronunciation, intonation, the melody of my speech, and my confidence in myself when I'm speaking English. I also enrolled in an IELTS writing course where I learned from scratch how to write essays, and some of them were assessed by teachers. Turned out my essays were not that bad and that my writing skills were not that awful as I thought before. And now I truly believe that extensive reading does make a difference to your active skills. I also had a journal for a few months and wrote my thoughts in there. And I wrote a lot of comments on social media. That's when I first started using a new, for me, method of learning grammar by carefully analyzing texts. And most texts I analyzed back then were more academic texts, like articles from BBC.com or Scientific American, because I wanted to take IELTS, and IELTS requires you to understand academically sounding texts and write in a more formal style. Speaking of Scientific American, I actually read an issue from cover to cover every month for a year and a half. And this was a game changer for my academic vocabulary. So if you want to take an English exam, study at university, or work in an academic environment, I suggest you trying this method of reading a similar journal or magazine regularly. I took the IELTS exam twice, in 2018 and 2021. One of them was general training and another one academic. I got an overall 8 out of 9 in both cases. I don't remember studying much in a couple of years before 2020, but by that time, English had become an important part of my life. Most of the content I consumed was in English, and when I went outside of my house, I had to communicate in English. That's another thing I need to mention. In 2013, my husband and I moved to Cyprus, which is a Greek-speaking country, and I'm studying Greek right now, but it's also a very popular tourist destination. Most of the people here speak really good English. You might think that moving to a country where everybody speaks English is like flipping a switch in your head. Now you're speaking perfectly in English. You don't need to study it. Nothing could be farther from the truth. For the longest time, I mostly interacted with sales assistants by saying them hello, and then thank you, and then bye. Does it sound like a very effective way to improve your speaking? And that was my fault, of course, because I didn't want to step outside of my comfort zone and find opportunities for myself to use English. I started coming out of my shell when I decided to take fitness classes where the trainer was British and nobody spoke my native language. And I started small with some small talk 5 minutes before and after a class. And these 5 minutes with time turned into full-blown conversations in English. And At around this time, I also found a speaking partner online and we discussed different things for a couple of years every week. And we also watched TV shows together and discussed the characters, the plots, things like that. That was fun. And then 2020 happened. The world stops working as usual. And to save my mental health from breaking, I started being more active online in a few communities related to English in one way or another. I joined a few English learning communities and book clubs, and I spent a lot of time discussing reading books, learning English, and stuff like that. In one of those groups, I hosted as a volunteer more than 50 speaking club sessions and lessons for my fellow English learners. And I enjoyed that a lot. I also recorded speaking on different topics in English and posted my recordings to Facebook. That was when I decided to create this channel. In 2021, Fluent English with Lady Giraffe was born, and my speaking and writing skills improved so much in the last 2.5 years because of the work on this channel. You might look at me now and think that I speak relatively eloquently and fluently on camera, but do you want to know a secret? Script writing and editing play a huge part in me speaking so well right now. I'm telling you this so that you stop comparing your speaking skills with mine. Actually, you shouldn't compare yourself with anyone on YouTube. I script my videos so that you could get the information in the best way possible, fast, without unnecessary fluff and a lot of mistakes. The way people speak on YouTube is not perfectly real. The way people speak in movies and TV shows is also not perfectly real. Real speaking is messy, full of awkward moments and pauses and even mistakes. So you should never apologize for your English, as I notice some of the learners like to do. Speaking English spontaneously is definitely something I want to focus on more in the near future and improve it to a solid C2 level. We'll have to wait and see where this journey will take me next. What about you? What is your journey? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to learn my favorite resources and tools to improve your English, check this video next. And if you want to know how I study grammar, check this video out. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time with more awesome language content.